that much. So now we bought the oven because you have to use it for so long you buy it, and now Judy is having at the project is having them make cookie dough that they can use on Sunday mornings, and they're going to start selling cookies again on Sunday mornings, but with our own homemade cookie dough that they make at the projects. Yeah, which is a much better idea.
We just need a Starbucks for it.
Yeah.
Go to church with your Starbucks.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of bringing food into church still. I don't, I mean, my mother would, smack it out of your hand, but I'm not quite that bad. But right. Well, I mean, the problem was that one church I was talking about is that the parents and the older people would take bags of cookies in. Well, you can't expect the kids not to, if the older people are going to do it. So, yeah.
We should take some food out, leave an area where you can lay down your picnic.
Or get some beanbag chairs or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's just what I want is to preach to people who are laying down.
Temporary seating.
Yeah, that'd be great, Dave. All right, let's begin with prayer. Oh well, Judy just walked in, so now we'll wait for Judy to come across the room before we pray. Okay, let's pray. Lord God, we give you thanks for gathering us together tonight around your word. We ask you, Lord, to be present with us as we seek to understand the things that you would have us to know. This we ask in your name. Amen. All right, so we are still in Acts chapter 19. We didn't quite finish that up last time, so we'll finish Acts 19 up. We're on verse 21 of Acts 19. Okay, so now, verse 21. Now after these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. And having sent into Macedonia two of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia for a while. About that time there arose no little disturbance, I love the way Luke puts things, no little disturbance, concerning the way. Remember, the way is what they're calling Christianity at this point, because Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one sees the Father except through me. And so apparently that stuck, and they started calling it the way. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought no little business to the craftsmen. These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades, and said, men, you know that from this business we have our wealth. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods are made with hands are not gods. And there is danger not only that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, and that she may even be deposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship. Well, this is a theological argument, right? No. This is a financial argument. This guy doesn't care about theology. He cares about his pockets being lined, and he makes a lot of money off of people buying silver statues of Artemis. Is Artemis a real thing? No. Has he ever seen Artemis? No. He's been making little Artemis statues for a long time out of silver and making a lot of money at it. And so, like all well-respected, intelligent people, rather than just go talk to Paul about it, he gathers up people and talks about Paul, right? All right. When they heard this, they were enraged and crying. Notice they weren't enraged and crying out before they heard this. It only takes one idiot to start stirring stuff up, right? And start, hey, one idiot breeds several idiots, right? Yeah. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Okay. So the city was filled with confusion. They rushed together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. But when Paul wished to go in among the crowd, the disciples would not let him go. He's going to end up getting stoned again, and not in the good way. And even some of the Asiarchs, who were friends of his, sent to him and were urging him not to venture into the theater. Now some cried out one thing, some another. For the assembly was in confusion, and most of them did not know why they had come together. I love that line. Most of them did not know why they had come together. That's the description of an average congregational meeting. Some people are on one side, some people on the other, but most people don't really know why they're there. Someone just told them to come. Some of the crowd prompted Alexander, whom the Jews had put forward, and Alexander, motioning with his hand, wanted to make a defense to the crowd. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, for about 2 hours they all cried out with one voice, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" Can you just see this? Okay? These people don't have a theological bone in their bodies, but as soon as somebody tries to say, hey, Debbie, let's talk about a different way of doing things, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Okay? And when the town clerk had quieted the crowd, he said, so you finally had to get somebody there who had some chutzpah, right? The town clerk. Somebody who deals with money. That's somebody they understand. Men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know that the city of Ephesians is temple keeper of the great Artemis, and that the sacred stone fell from the sky? See, the tradition is that at some point, before anybody else can ever remember, and nobody actually saw it, but at some point, the great stone that became the statue of Artemis actually fell from the sky, theoretically probably from Mount Olympus, and landed in Ephesus, and Ephesus became this great city of Artemis. Artemis, by the way, is the Greek equivalent to Diana, the huntress. She's the god of the hunt.
Sounds like the movie where they got Coke bottle fell out of there.
Right, yeah, right. What was that? Yeah, the gods must be crazy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They started worshiping.
Yeah. So verse 36, we're in Acts 19, Deb. Verse 36. Seeing then that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious nor blasphemers of our goddess. So he's pointing out here that Paul and all his compadres have not said anything bad about Artemis. Okay? If, therefore, Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against everyone, the courts are open, and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek any further, it shall be settled in a regular assembly. For we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today, since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion. And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. So you get the treasurer out there, and finally he can bring what do they call them? It wasn't the town clerk. Yeah, town clerk, the treasurer, the guy in charge of the money. He can finally bring some sense to all of this and point out to them that we don't accomplish anything by rioting. Where was he a year ago? Okay. That's you don't. Riots are. Who was it? Somebody told me that riots are the voice of the unheard. No, riots are the temper tantrum of the spoiled rotten. That's what riots are. Okay, what's that? Oh, I don't care. Yeah, I'm so sick of hearing people defend riots. Rioting is never okay. I don't care what the situation is. It is not okay to riot. It's okay to protest. Yet we've long, as a country, have said peaceful protesting is not only okay but even advisable. That if you see something that needs to be changed, that's one of the ways you make it known is by peacefully protesting. You'll notice that the Constitution gives us the right to peacefully assemble, right? Nowhere does the Constitution or any other Ushin give us the right to throw bricks through windows if we don't get our way.
So, as good Christians, should we be against the Boston Tea Party? As good Christians, should we be against the Boston Tea Party?
Yeah, I would say that destroying property is never acceptable in the Christian church. Yeah, I think that we could look at anything and say anytime you are wantonly destroying property, that would be a violation of the seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal.
take what is not yours and do something adverse with it. Yeah, I think you could extend the Ten Commandments to that. Yeah, you'll never hear me intentionally. I mean, I might do it accidentally, but you'll never hear me intentionally confuse patriotism with theology. You know, it's fine to be patriotic. It's fine to love your country. Everybody loves their country. Even people who are in terrible countries love their countries. You know. Well, I mean, yeah,
There are those who speak against, and I'm not so sure they love their country.
Well, I mean, you know, but my point is that it's natural to love your country.
Yeah.
Just like it's natural to love your family. You know, even if your family is really crappy, you know, you still love your family, right? You know, and it's, what is the old joke? You can pick your nose, you can pick your something, you can pick your nose, but yeah, you can pick your seat, you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your relatives. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's it. You know, I mean, we receive the family that we're given, and you know, and we're typically very defensive of that family. And you know, anytime you want to find out about that, work with kids and say something negative about their family of origin, and you will find that they are almost never on your side, even if their family is completely horrible.
I mean, it's manifested in the sandbox when kids say like, "Oh, well,
my dad can beat up your dad." That's right. Yep.
So we have a tendency to add the word righteous a lot of times to lawless acts. Like you could have a righteous murder.
Oh yeah.
Or a righteous beating. You know,
Right.
That where you're supposedly justified.
Right.
in doing it.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing for Christians, especially. I think really Christians more than non-Christians struggle with this. I think non-Christians, sometimes at least, have a clearer understanding of morality. You know, or they are clear to they have clear division as to right and wrong in their lives. Where Christians sometimes get confused as though being morally right allows you to be sinful somehow. Like, because this person violated the commandments, then I can righteously beat them. No. Nowhere is that. I think God says quite the opposite. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. You know? Yeah, we're not given that option of taking vengeance. It's hard for Christians sometimes because we want to get caught up in that. But I'm living a good life, darn it. You know, I'm doing everything right. I've heard people say that, by the way. I've heard people tell me when they're having conflict, particularly I've heard it from parents in conflict with their children. We did everything right. I bet you didn't. Just judging from having raised a couple myself. And looking back and saying, oh, we could have done that better. You know, pretty sure you didn't do everything right. Okay, you did everything to the best of your ability at the time. Sure, maybe not, but maybe you did what you thought was right every time. Sure, I would not argue with that. I doubt it, but I know human beings, and we tend to be fairly self-centered, and so, but I will not argue with you on that. But I did everything right? No, sorry. But the point is that morality is very clear. The Ten Commandments are explicit. And you can answer every question you ever had with the Ten Commandments. You may not like the answer. Like we want to rally around the Boston Tea Party and say, that was a great moment in American history. America! You know? But it was wrong. Because we were throwing material that was not ours. I mean, not we, as in this room, but obviously, you know, the people who did it. We're throwing materials that was not theirs into the ocean.
Oh, and I mean, like, they obviously weren't asked if the people could, like, bring it over and everything.
No. No, I mean, you know, it's not wrong to protest in unjust taxes, but you protest unjust taxes peacefully. Now, how would things have been changed if we had been more peaceful? I don't know. I can't answer that. If we were still English citizens, would that be the worst thing in the world?
I mean, by the time World War II would have rolled around, we would have been German Christians.
Well, could be. Yeah, who knows? And that's one of those things also, that where we firmly put things in God's control, and we say God's in charge. So whatever happens, and we're along for the ride. But our job is to do our very best as God's children to be good stewards and good citizens of the world. That's our job. Now, we're not going to be perfect at that. We're going to fail time and time again. But that's our job. Okay. Yeah. What? Oh, okay.
I was just thinking about a more recent incident. Remember O.J. Simpson?
Yes.
After he just got done getting off the hook for murder, he did that robbery.
Uh-huh.
And supposedly, the people took his stuff, and he was only taking it back. And
Uh-huh.
it really belonged to him,
Uh-huh.
But nobody bought it.
Right.
They didn't want to spend time.
Right.
It was a typical, like a righteous.
Apparently, his mother never taught him 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
That was one of my mother's foundational lectures. Is 2 wrongs don't make a right. Sorry, and you can't get around that. You just can't. It's never okay. If you are wronged, what do? Turn the other cheek, and we don't like that. We want to say slap back and then turn the other cheek. Let's see. Let me see what I got here in the notes. Unbelievers will fight against Christianity. That's the norm. Okay, don't expect unbelievers to be happy with Christianity, because Christianity brings disharmony to an unbeliever's world in many ways. Like, for instance, just leave it off. You can just leave it off. Yeah. You can. The Christianity is going to bring the disharmony in their lives in many ways. One is, for instance, if you're an unbeliever and you own, a store, and you pay taxes, and that church down the street doesn't have to pay any taxes. Why is that?
Is there a righteous institution that doesn't do anything wrong, and obviously it's in their minds? that a
Exactly.
righteous institution-
Why don't they see that? Yeah, unbelievers, that's irritating to unbelievers. I understand. From a fiscal perspective, I understand why it's irritating. And the argument, the argument that our forefathers made was that the church is a valuable asset to society. That it's good for society for people to be religious and go to church because it makes better citizens. That was the argument. I don't know that a lot of unbelievers buy that argument. They would say that's just an excuse to get off paying taxes. As long as we have a good old Rome in our back pocket, we're pretty safe. Because if Rome ever had to start paying property taxes, they would collapse. They would never be able to survive. So as long as we have Rome with us, we're okay. But there's always people who are trying to push that. Why are churches paying? Yeah, that's an example of unbelievers getting irritated, and rightly so. I understand if you're an unbeliever. It would be no different if you were a believer and somehow you got some tax benefit for not having faith. That would be frustrating. Now, in this country, we've always been fair with all people of faith, Christian or non-Christian. If you're a person of faith, if you're a Hindu, a Muslim, a Jew, whatever, you get the same benefits. So that's that we've been good about that, and that's been probably our salvation. Because if we didn't give mosques and synagogues and whatever you call Hindu temples, which I can't remember right now, if you didn't give them the same benefit, then I think we would have lost our benefit a long time ago. But because we always argued for them as well,
I think a lot of it's a misplaced hate too, because you're not flying on your Learjet to Dubai right now. You know what I mean? Like, you're not on your private jet going to Dubai and, you know, rubbing elbows with Prince.
I would be if this cheap church would buy me one.
We're trying to get the numbers up.
Other televangelists, they get their own jets.
But it makes it easier for the non-believers to look at it and be like, well, this guy's driving a Lamborghini, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not paying taxes.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. You know, when you look at who's the guy in No, not Billy. Billy Graham was never like that. He never. Joel Osteen, yeah. Billy Graham. Do you know that Billy Graham never took a dime for any of his books? Never made a dime off them. Gave all the money away. All the money from his books went into various ministries, you know, missions, things like that. You know, he was a very typical 1950s televangelist, but he was also a very serious Baptist. You know, he was not okay, Sarah's checking in. Hold on. See what's going on in Louisville. Just wait. Yeah, she says just wait till she starts making big bucks. She'll buy me a jet. so I can fly from Villa Park to Lombard.
Christian just signed a bill releasing students from class, if I get this correct, for religious holidays.
Oh,
Yes, but I was wondering, since they don't always follow, they're not always off on Good Friday anymore, you know, which was before we were always off that week
yeah.
afterwards. I wondered that if every Christian would take Good Friday off plus teachers,
I don't know how that'll work.
I mean,
Yeah.
how would the classes work?
Now, when I was growing up in the South, in the deep South, the Catholic kids always got Wednesdays off during Advent and Lent, and the Lutheran kids didn't.
Yeah, I know.
We were like, "Hello, we have services too," you know? But they had service at noon. We had it at 7, so the church said, "Well, the school said you don't need to be out." We told our pastor, "Put service at noon." He didn't think it was a good idea.
But they had to wear uniforms and the Lutherans didn't,
Yeah.
you know, Catholics was-
Right. Yeah. Although I'm trying to remember if there wasn't a Lutheran school in my town, but in the town over, I don't remember if they wore uniforms or not. Can't remember. The Baptists wore uniforms.
I meant Kenneth Copeland, by the way, not Billy Graham.
Yeah, you did.
Huh?
You what?
I meant Kenneth Copeland.
Oh,
not
Kenneth
Billy
Copeland, not Billy Graham. Yeah. Ken Copeland's one. Joel Osteen. There's a guy in New Orleans area. I can't think of his name, but he's the one who I can't remember. He's the one who got his congregation to buy him a jet because he told me he needed a jet to conduct the
We're
ministry.
very sorry about that. It's like-
Right? Yeah. What was his name? Jones.
Oh,
Jim Jones and Tammy Lee. Was it Jim and Tammy?
Drink your Kool-Aid.
Baker. Jim Jones was the one in the cool. Yeah, he was the one in Guyana. Jim and Tammy Baker. Yep, they had jets and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and you know, I mean, I understand there being confusion from non-Christians when you look at somebody who's supposed to be good stewards and say, okay, it's not, you know, you don't have to be in destitute poverty, but let's be real here. You know, who needs to drive a $300,000 car? Okay, I don't care how much money you make. You don't need to drive a $300,000 car. You know, that's just obscene. When there's so much more that money could go to help, to do things, to increase ministry, to feed people, to whatever. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's, there's a lot of stuff that can be. I don't begrudge anybody a nice car, but you can get a really nice car for less than $100,000. You don't need a $300,000 car.
Yeah, that's why I didn't buy one.
That's why what?
That's why I didn't buy one.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. The issue is not theological; it's financial, as it all often is. If the belief in Artemis is diminished, so too will the demand for the temple, worship, statues, sacrifices brought to the temple. I mean, it's a whole industry, right? It's not just That's why it called in all the tradesmen. Because it's not just the guys who make the little statues, it's the stores that sell the statues. It's the people who work at the temple for the people to come and worship the statues and buy the statues. It's the people who make the sacrifices and receive the sacrifices. And all. I mean, it's a whole industry. Let's see. Okay, I talked about that. Why is there such a huge lobby to keep abortion legal in this country? You ever asked that question?
For the vote.
Can't figure it out.
For the what?
For the vote.
Yeah, but why is there a huge lobby? The lobby is driving the vote. Why is the lobby to keep abortion legal? Because if you talk to, I don't know what the percentage is, a lot of people would say, yeah, I would never have an abortion, or I don't really like abortions, but, it's not my place to say. That's what most people say. It's not my place to tell another person what to do. Money eases the conscience, okay. What's the real driving factor, I think, is the industry. There's a huge industry going on in abortion clinics and the money that abortions make. The whole Planned Parenthood thing is a big industry. And what's interesting now is I think Sarah was telling me that she had read something, I think it was Sarah told me this, that she had read something in some medical paper or something about how they're having trouble finding doctors that'll do abortions in some areas.
Yeah, sometimes people think you're lying.
Yeah, well, I mean that's hurting the industry.
Right.
Is because now she says easy way to do what you want without consequences. Same with Plan B. Yeah, easy way. That's what she says. That's why abortion is so big. Yeah, I do think it makes it easy for people, but I mean, and Lord knows we all love the easy button, don't we? But rather than saying, we don't ever really want to trust God's will. We don't want to ever say, this wasn't my plan, but here we go, and let's see where God takes this.
So
Okay.
you're saying that the industry is planting the thoughts and
Yeah, I think there's a whole.
It's my right, my body. Oh, and that's all coming from the industry.
Right.
Stirring up.
Right.
Planned Parenthood is a very big
There are many women, I think, having talked to some, there are many women, I think, who feel almost like they betray their sex by being pro-life. That they feel like they're betrayers, and saying, "Oh no, I want." It's like they put it this way, as though if you're not pro-life, if you're not pro-choice, then you want some man, I don't know who he is, some guy in a three-piece suit in a building somewhere, to control your body. Okay, some man is going to control my body. Okay, no, that's not what pro-life means. Pro-life means that we're opposed to killing children, either prenatal or postnatal. That's always been my argument. If you're going to be in favor of prenatal murder for children, then you ought to give parents of teenagers a shot at it too. You ought to have till they're like 13 to decide. This just isn't working out. You're going to have to die. I'm sorry. That's what it is, right? It's murder of children. So we're pro-life doesn't mean we're in favor of you having to stay home and drop all of your plans and raise this child that you conceive. It means that you have to take an option for getting this child born and reared, in some way. So you find a family member that wants this child, you put this child up for adoption, you keep this child yourself, you do whatever. And then Danya makes really good arguments about we need to put our money where our mouth is. That rather than just yakking about pro-life, we need to be serious about funding adoption agencies and funding adoptive parents. And it's like when Danya and I wanted to adopt Neil, it was about, for a private adoption in those days, it was around $5,000 to $10,000 for a private adoption. You find the birth mother, you pay for all the fees, you pay for you pay for a lot, and social workers and all that. And so I talked to our insurance company because I was a naive person who thought it made sense. And I said, look, Danya is a high-risk pregnancy. So we went to Swedish Hospital and we talked because we weren't sure whether we were going to adopt or do it the old-fashioned way. And and we talked to a doctor. Because of her lungs, she would be a high-risk pregnancy. We asked for, can you help us with the costs? What is this going to be? And the costs were going to be in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $75,000 for her to biologically have a child. Okay, of which we would pay $1,200, which was our deductible, and Concordia Plans would pay the rest. So we went to Concordia Plans and said, look, we're kind of okay either way. But this way is going to cost you anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000. This way it costs you $5,000 or $10,000. Can you help us offset the cost of a private? Oh no, we don't do that. Well, why not? Well, we just don't. Nobody does that. And we said, really? Seems logical to us. Well, that was our mistake. We're dealing with insurance companies. Logical. But see, that's the kind of thing that if we're going to be pro-life, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and say then we're going to help young women who need help, who are pregnant, to have that baby and get that baby placed into a loving Christian home, okay, and not just mouth the words. Or we're going to help young women keep that baby. And figure out, one of the things. I've always had a dream of having the church having some kind of apartment house, for women who want to keep their babies, and some kind of subsidized, plan, and have a deaconess on staff that can help with training and help with all the things that they might need, and help them figure out education and jobs and all that kind of how they're going to support this child, and so we don't end up with that treadmill of the unwed mother producing the unwed mother producing the unwed mother, and they never get ahead. And 3 generations down the line, you've still got the same problem. Largely because, no one ever gave them a hand up. And we can make arguments about whether that's fair or not. Well, no one ever helped me. I don't care. The reality is the reality. If we don't intervene and do something to stop the cycle, then the cycle will continue repeating over and over and over and over again. I spent 10 years on the board of Lutheran Child and Family Services and saw the cycle repeat over and over and over. And one of the frustrations I always had was that there was never any attempt to stop the cycle. Everything was putting Band-Aids on. It was like people were having aortic aneurysms, and they were running around with Band-Aids and saying, "Well, let's try this," And here you have people laying on the ground bleeding out with Band-Aids. We have to have a serious correction to the system, and I don't think we can. Yes, Lord. See, he agrees. Yeah, he agrees. I don't think we can do that in a global way, because I think the machinery and the money would be astronomical. But I think we could do that in a small way. We could take, if we as a church could figure out how to take one person under our wing and say, we're going to stop the cycle. Sort of the old teacher story. Do you know the teacher story about the starfish? Teachers tell this all the time. Yeah, the woman's walking down the beach and throwing starfish in, and her friend says, "You realize there's like 1,000 starfish up here, and you're throwing back 6. Doesn't really matter. What are you doing?" And she picks up a starfish and says, "It matters for this one," and throws it back in. And so I think that's the attitude we have to take with this problem. So that's a long a long soapbox that has nothing to do with the text, but it does in the sense that we got to recognize how much money drives sin. Okay, that the cottage industries that were keeping Artemis going keep things going around us all the time too. Okay, the porn industry, the sex trade, the drug trade. Money drives sin, and it really does. Yeah.
I wonder, if it ever came to a point where, like, Christians made a big enough noise about taking care of, don't get the baby in the word, we'll take care of it. I mean, if you think about it, that's an option, don't abort babies, but you got to have somebody to take them.
Right.
If you just flooded the market right now with a bunch of unborn babies, what would you do with them? Somebody's got to take them.
Yeah.
So now,
Right.
so now, but say you could convince people that they families that already have their own kids, whatever.
Yeah.
It's part of God's commandment. Everybody is in charge and responsible for the children.
Right.
In the school.
Right.
Not just the parents.
Right.
There's also the local regulation or restriction of DCFS, and a lot of the things that you used to be able to do
Yeah.
are no longer.
Well, and that's that's like Danya and I wanted to do foster care. Okay. Do you know how hard it is to get a foster child in DuPage County? Almost impossible. You don't have a lot of foster children in DuPage County, and DCFS has made it so that you have to place foster children within their zip code. Well, that makes all the sense in the world now, right? Because children who are coming out of really bad zip codes don't get to go to a better zip code. They have to stay in their crappy zip code. Okay? Because DCFS has decided that that's best for the child. Okay? Why do we want to keep them in bad schools? I have a good friend who another reason we couldn't get a foster child is because we're white. Okay? And there aren't very many white foster children. But I have a friend who lives up in Huntley who's black, and he can't get a foster child. He wanted a foster child. Well, there just aren't a lot of black foster children in Huntley. There aren't a lot of foster children at all, but especially black ones. Yeah, so it's a reverse, right? So yeah, he's dealing with basically reverse racism, is that he can't get a foster child because he's a black man living in Huntley, and they were like, well, if you lived in Inglewood or Austin or any of the places where black people are supposed to live, that's the implication, right? You're supposed to be here, and then we could place them. But sorry, not in Huntley. Yeah, right, yeah. But suffice to say that money and power are our greatest idols. And any time you have something hinky going on, it's usually being driven by money or power or both. Okay. Let's see. Different types of power. One of the reasons that we struggle so in this country right now, that we're having such a struggle in this country right now, is that different ideologies worship different kinds of power. Okay, and you will notice that, and both in their extreme are wrong, and both in their moderation are okay. As long as they work with them. So typically, conservatives idolize freedom. Okay, that's where they draw their power from. I get the egalitarianism. I can do whatever I want. The good old Western cowboy, mountain man, gonna go ride the range and do whatever I want. Nobody can tell me different. Okay, where the liberal ideology is much more draws its power much more from uniformity. We all do this together. Okay, and then when we're dealing with either in the extreme, that's a lot of times where we find the conflict in this country right now. Is that you have one group of people saying, we all have to march on this line, and if you're not marching with us, you're bad. And you have another group of people saying, we all have to do whatever we want, and if you're not doing whatever you want, and you're not letting me do whatever I want, you're bad. Okay? because it's the extremes of those two sides. There's nothing wrong with having a love for community and uniformity. There's nothing wrong with having a love for freedom and egalitarianism. But when we make either our idol, that's where it becomes wrong. And that's where what we're dealing with a lot right now, particularly right now. It's not like it's brand new or anything like that. I do have to say, having said that we need to remember that freedom is the basis of Christianity. Okay? Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." But not freedom to do whatever we want. Okay, that's where we take it a step too far sometimes. Is that I'm a Christian, I can do whatever I want. No. Freedom for Jesus is knowing Jesus. Freedom is being able to put everything in his hands and let him handle it all. And all you have to do is just sort of, bask in the glow of the cross. That's real freedom. Because real freedom is not doing whatever you want at whatever expense to anyone else there happens to be. Real freedom is saying, no, I'm going to live in the light of the cross. And I'm going to trust Jesus to take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. And I'm not going to worry about anything outside of Jesus. So when somebody tells me I have to do this, but that's not consistent with what Jesus is saying, then I'm going to say, no, I don't have to do that. You have to do this, whatever this is. I mean, it depends on the society, right? I mean, there's some societies where it says, where they say you have to kill your second-born child because there's too many people in this country. And so if you have more than one child, you have to abort your second. Well, they did that for a while, and it wasn't working out so well. Yeah, as the population started to plummet. Yeah, but, I mean, at one time that was the truth. And so at that point you have to say, oh, no, I don't have to do that because I'm going to trust Jesus on this one. And then people say, oh, yeah, you're going to end up in jail. That's okay. Paul was aware of that. He knew that he was there was a good likelihood that he was going to end up in jail. He marched headfirst into it. What you do as a Christian. Okay, any questions on that before we move on to Psalm 3? We're going to get through Psalm 3 here in the next 20 minutes. It's a short psalm. It's a really good psalm. And before we read it, I'm just going to remind you of the background. It says a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. Okay, remember David. We all remember, which son do we always remember of David? Solomon. Yeah, Solomon gets all the glory. Okay? But Solomon was not his only son. He had other children. In fact, he had a lot of other children because he had a lot of wives. Okay? And it was not necessarily, it was not sinful to have multiple wives. It wasn't, God did not tell them anywhere you can only have one wife. Okay? We were still in the process of populating the earth and God's people growing, and there's no place where you're going to find where God says you may only have one wife. Okay? Even in the New Testament, it's a little dicey. St. Paul talks about a pastor being the husband of one wife. But even that, it's a little dicey, and you can make arguments for polygamy. Let's see, that wasn't even a text came. I don't know what that was. Oh, National Weather Service has issued a thunderstorm warning. Really? I've never heard of this. The biggest argument against polygamy is what idiot man would think he could deal with two wives? You just have to be a nincompoop to think that'll work. But it's a theological question that when did that stop? But it certainly had not stopped in David's time. That it was okay, although God never recommended it. He never said, go forth and marry multiple wives. Okay? He just never said much about it, one way or the other. So David had many sons, and Absalom was one of them. And Absalom was gorgeous. He was big and brawny and had long flowing hair and sort of vain, and really, he was he was the one who killed his brother because his brother raped their sister. And so Absalom killed his brother, and that put him first in line to the throne. He was the oldest now, and he assumed that he would take over when David's reign was over, and then found out, no, it's going to go to Solomon. Okay? So unlike modern monarchy, where they have all kinds of rules that are controlled by the state, in these days it was controlled by the king. Okay? So David would say who his throne went to, who his successor was. And he had been told by God that it was Solomon. Kind of interesting, right? Who is Solomon? Whose mom is Solomon? Bathsheba, right? So David commits his little indiscretion, which wasn't very little, because he had Uriah killed. He had Bathsheba's husband killed. He didn't actually do it, but he put him on the front line of the battle to make sure he died. After he had gotten Uriah's wife pregnant, okay, and so then he has Uriah killed so that he can marry Bathsheba and make himself look like the hero, which probably a lot of people thought he was. It's like, oh, look at the king. Isn't that wonderful? That poor man died on the battlefield, and now he's marrying the widow who's pregnant. And, oh, it's just great. And then Nathan, the prophet, comes to him and says, hey, let me tell you about this guy. This one guy, he only has this one little lamb. He loves this little lamb. It's his favorite little animal in the world. And he takes care of that little lamb and treats it like a kid, And his neighbor has a whole flock of sheep. And the neighbor was having company for dinner, and he sent his servants over to steal the one little ewe lamb and kill it and cook it for the company. And David says, this is terrible. This guy should be strung up. This is horrible that he killed that one little lamb. That guy only had one little lamb. And Nathan looks at him and says, thou art the man. That's where it's good in King James. Thou art the man. And David realizes what he did. That he had all of these wives. He was the king of Israel. He had everything. And he goes out and he takes Uriah's one wife. Okay, only wife Uriah had. Here's Uriah, his faithful servant. And David, it all comes crashing down on him, what he did. That kid dies. Okay? That kid dies that was conceived. He's born. He dies. David mourns for him. And then he moves on. And later, Bathsheba had Solomon. And then Solomon is picked by God to be the next king of Israel. It's really remarkable the way God brings things full circle. Okay, the way, if you're just patient, the way God will bring everything around to where it all kind of fits together and makes sense. And we so often, people who are patient with God have a long history of kind of sitting back and saying, oh, that's what you were doing. Okay? And so this psalm was written during Absalom's rebellion. Now, Absalom ends up dying. The end of the story for Absalom is David's army is routing him, and he's riding with his long, beautiful, flowing golden hair, and he rides under a tree, and his hair gets caught in the branches of the tree, and he gets yanked off his mount, and then the soldier that's chasing him shoots arrows into him and kills him. Okay? And David falls apart and mourns the loss of his son. It's a great story. It's in that's in the Bible somewhere. That's a good Lutheran Bible reference. 2 Samuel, maybe about 15, something like that. 2 Samuel around 15, something like that. The story 15 through 17, something like that.
Is the moral of that man with long hair should ride horses?
It's God will get you for having your hair too long. That's what it means. Yeah. 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 So that's what I tell my son Noah all the time. Yeah. God will punish you. Look at Absalom. And so David mourns the loss of his son and how much he loved his son. It's a great scene. That even this guy who rebelled against him, it's a great testimony to a father's love. That a father loves his son even when his son is a royal pain in the butt. You know, there is a bond between fathers and sons that just can't be unbound, even when they're at each other's throats. You know, and you can't get much more at each other's throats than David and Absalom, right? I mean, Absalom's literally trying to kill him. Okay, I mean, he has armies attacking him, right? All right, so let me make sure I haven't got messages here that I'm not paying attention to. Yes, I do. Danya says, Danya is on a roll. Let's see. She's making a pro-life statement about how they use fetuses for profit. So women become their products. Yeah, to some extent that can be true. I don't think that's the driving factor in abortion. I don't think in that it is true that they use aborted fetuses for all kinds of stuff, but I don't think that's the driving factor. I think the driving factor is bigger than that. It's not just that. I guess that's what I'd say. It's not just that. That's part of the industry, but it's a bigger industry even than that. I mean, think about how many people Planned Parenthood employs. You know, think about how many people all those pro-choice, what do you call them, PACs, super committees? You know, the political action committees, PACs, yeah. Think of how many people those employ. This is big money. You know, there's big money, and if abortion ever goes away, and we don't have abortion anymore, there's a lot of people out of work. You know, I mean, really, abortionists, abortion clinics, whole sections of some hospitals that are all devoted to that. I mean, it's a big deal. Sarah says, no wonder Neil shaves his head. He doesn't want to die like Absalom. So at one point, Absalom had chased David to the point where David had fled. Okay, and David took off and ran. And while he was running, or in the midst of his running, he wrote this psalm. A psalm of David when he fled from Absalom his son. Psalm 3. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there's no salvation for him in God. Why would they be saying that? Because they judge him. They judge him. People know now what he did with Bathsheba. He's supposed to be king of Israel. And he's out, messing around with women bathing on the roof and then having their husbands killed. Okay? But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord. Save me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people. First of all, notice how David speaks of the Lord's work in the past tense. He writes this psalm while he's running and hiding from Absalom. But he writes it in the past tense, as though, yeah, I know God's going to take care of this. I don't have any concern about that. God's going to fix this. People thought that God would abandon David because of his sin, because that is what many religious people thought then, and what many religious people think now. Is God only blesses you as long as you do what he says, right? I mean, there's whole church bodies that cut their teeth on that fabric. You know, God blesses you if you do what he says. If you're a good Christian, and whatever that means, if you're a good Christian, then God will bless you. If you're not blessed, then you must not be a very good Christian. If you're struggling to pay the bills, you must not be a very faithful Christian. If you have a serious illness, you must not be a very faithful Christian. There's whole church bodies that teach that. Right? There's church bodies that teach one-to-one punishment. You know, if you get some disease, if you everything's an eye for an eye. If you go blind, you must have been looking at something bad. You know, if you get tongue cancer, it's because of the way you talk to people. You know, if you get lung cancer, it's because of the negative things you breathed out. You know, I mean, there's all kind of, or they'll even do it with even keeping it medical. Oh well, you deserve to have AIDS because you're homosexual. Okay? I've heard people say that. Well, that's what you get for being a homo. You know, now you got AIDS. God doesn't do things one-to-one. He doesn't give you a disease because you were naughty. He doesn't look down from heaven and say, "Oh, Dina forgot to say our prayers tonight. Bad cold for you tomorrow." No. Yeah, there's your stuffy nose. That's why. You know, he doesn't do that. Now, having said that, are there diseases in the world? Yeah, we live in a sin-fallen world. The whole world is affected by sin, and yes, we have terrible viruses in the world like AIDS, or HIV is the virus, I guess, but or COVID, or whatever else. We have terrible viruses. Yeah, we live in a broken world, absolutely. But never do we assign one-to-one for that. We never said you did this, therefore you get that. That's not what God says. God says he punished Jesus for all of our sin. If he punished Jesus on the cross for all of our sin, then there is nothing more for us to be punished about. It can't be. Soon as you say that, soon as you say, well, God's punishing me because I did this, or I thought that, or I said this, then you're saying Jesus didn't do enough. Okay? Jesus must not have gotten it right because somehow he forgot my sin. Okay? No, you are affected by sin because it's like living in a polluted lake. You know, you live in this polluted lake and you're going to have infections, and you're going to have I don't know, whatever you get from living in a polluted lake. But it's not because you did something. It's not because you swam the Australian crawl instead of the backstroke. It's just because you live in a polluted lake. Does God use negative things sometimes to teach us? Yes. Sometimes we bemoan, oh, that poor thing has cancer. Oh, that poor thing had a heart attack. Sometimes those are the best things in the world. Good bout of cancer does wonders for people. Good heart attack, man, sometimes that'll slap somebody right into shape. God uses those things in our lives to help us. Now I'm not sure. I can't always tell you, what he's doing in my life. Something happens to me, and I'm like, oh, I understand because you did this, because I did that, and that's not supposed to teach me this. Sometimes it takes a long time for me to figure it out and say, oh, now I see what you were showing me. But I always tell people, remember that God is the ultimate teacher. The question is never, why did God do this to me? The question is always, what is God teaching me? And David's learning as he's living through Absalom's rebellion. He's learning. What are you showing me, Lord? But I have absolute confidence that you're going to see me through this, that I'll get through it, and it'll be okay. A person's sin and repentance is between that person and God.
None of us are equipped to judge one another. That is not to say sin does not have earthly consequences. It is to say that we have no business judging a person's righteousness, unless, of course, we are perfectly righteous. So, the first among you without sin can cast the first stone. You know, that's what someone famous said. All right. That's where we're going to stop for tonight. We'll pick up at Acts 20 next week. You have what? So, I'll tell you a story about that as soon as I log off. Let's close with prayer. Lord, we give you thanks for gathering us together tonight. We ask you, Lord, to be present with us and to see us home safely. This we ask in your holy name. Amen. End